Malaysia transferred all this to the ship of Awa Maru. What is that Awa Maru? Awa Maru is an hospital ship printed with a cross, white cross, so that for safety passage. Japan entered the game of the war not simply to win, but to hoard wealth for the Bansai Nippon. The first shipload of war booty entered Japan from different points, with at least a list of countries included even Manchuria, when General Kodama and General Yamamoto needed reinforcement. Yamashita, then operating under direct order from the Emperor, was assigned to secure the loot taken from the warship of General Percival of the British forces. The imperial patronage eventually made Yamashita the subject of envy by his peers. In the Japanese Imperial Corps, including Japanese Field Marshal Heiichi Terauchi. The loot accidentally was not only in gold bars, but was also in assorted of jewelries, golden religious artifacts, and icons such as gold statue of Buddha and Roman Catholic saints. The second shipload of war booty, instead of being immediately brought to Japan, were then stashed in different places in Luzon. That was why during the Japanese time in 1945, the Perocarel, meaning the railroad track, had to run from Azcárraga, now Recto, and Antonio Rivera then continued up north to La Union, then down south again to Camarines Sur, because those gold bars are very heavy. Yamashita fought his last battle in the areas running from Caraballo Mountain to Benguet and Ifugao. When the Americans bombarded Japan, and Japanese warships changed their route and instead made a side trip to the Philippine Island with the intention of hiding their loot. This made General Douglas MacArthur return even more inevitable. He says, "I shall return." This was also the reason why the Japanese, before the end of the war, wanted to make the Philippines one of the prefectures as the Asia Coast Prosperity Spain. When the war took turn in favor of United States in May 1942, after the U.S. Navy destroyed the Japanese fleet at the Battle of Midway, MacArthur forces began to mighty push to the north, leapfrogging from Guam, Saipan, Taiwan, and other atolls. By early 1944, U.S. military strategists began to ponder the next major target, Taiwan. The plan called for circumventing the Philippines in order to be closer to Japan. Conventional wisdom tells us that the MacArthur disapproved of this plan, warning that to bypass the archipelago would incur the open hostility of the Filipinos and damage America's image throughout Asia. President Roosevelt went to Hawaii in July 1944 to confer with MacArthur and Admiral Nimitz so as to resolve the issue. But once home, Roosevelt referred the matter to the Joint Forces of Staff. They finally approved MacArthur's plan to land in Leyte, targeting about the Taiwan option. After having been informed that the gold bullion was being hoarded by General Yamashita, the Tiger of Malaya. Will you kindly continue this, Madam? When the American forces entered Manila,
Di pa kami tapos.
so kompleto na kayo ng information dyan.
When the American forces entered Manila and discovered that the gold bullion had been successfully shipped to Japan, they hung Yamashita in Los Baños, Laguna for his crime war and for his alleged role in the devastation of Manila, despite the fact that the bore no responsibility for the catalysm, having ruled from the start against defending the capital. It was Admiral Iwabuchi and his 20,000 naval troops armed with automatic weapon who emerged in an orgy of atrocities, impaling babies on bayonets, raping women, and beheading. Eventually, on his trial, Yamashita accepted the verdict, calmly saying, "I am not ashamed, because before God for what I've done, when I have to die, but if you say to me, you do not have the ability to command the Japanese army, I should say nothing, because it is in my own nature. I know that all your American military officers have been very tolerant and exercise rightful judgment when I have had a good treatment. Kind attitude from your good-natured officers who all the time protected me. I'll never forget what they have done for me. Even if I die, I don't blame my executioners. I'll pray to God to bless them." In fairness to Yamashita, are these the words of a thief and plunderer? Yamashita was not only a brave officer, he was also upright and honest, and would never think of hoarding someone else's treasure or gold.
So wala siyang kinukuha kahit na isa. Paano mo sasabihin niya Yamashita treasure yan? Sige.
When he took command of Nippon forces in a last-ditch effort to defend the Cordillera, Yamashita had no time gathering gold bullion or any kind of treasure. It is completely unfair, therefore, to link Yamashita to any treasure hoard in gold bullions.
Wala.
Despite the clear fact that Yamashita was a victim of judicial lynching, he never lost his composure. One of his prosecutors reportedly told Yamashita's chief defense counsel, Frank A. Real, "Damn it, it makes me mad. Seeing him decked out in uniform. He steals the show, dominates the council room. If I had my way, I put him in prison, overalls and chains." After the death of Lieutenant General Tomoyuki Yamashita, stories about his secretly possessing one of the greatest treasures of all time quickly spread like wildfire.
Na.
In 1953, President Elpidio Quirino announced that he would release some Japanese soldiers who were still imprisoned in the Philippines for war crimes in exchange for Tokyo's cooperation in an official probe to determine once and for all whether Yamashita had indeed left behind billions of dollars worth of treasure. The inquiry was to be headed by an American of Japanese descent minority, Fukunutsu, who worked as one of the investigators of the Allied War Crime Tribunal. Before leaving the Philippines, he said that no evidence was found to show that the treasure ever existed. MacArthur's much ballyhooed return was nothing more than a salvaging operation. The Americans were more interested in the Yamashita treasure than the liberation of the Philippines. If the so-called Yamashita treasure is true, how come no Japanese authority, no Japanese officer, no survivor of the Japanese Imperial Army, no goose-stepping colleague of Yamashita has ever stepped forward to authenticate the story? How come no witness, whether Japanese, Filipino, Mangyan, Igorot, Baluga, ever lived to tell the tale why they were all massacred? How come not one of the Southeast Asian countries supposedly looted by Yamashita of their gold holdings ever came out in the open after the Second World War to protest and seek reparation?
So, kung totoo yan, bakit hindi nag-complain sana yung mga kwan? Hello? Bakit hindi sila nag-complain? Nawalan pala sila eh. Bakit hindi sila nag-file? So, isang malaking kalokohan na ito. Hello? Ito yung sinasabi nilang Teres. Hello? Pressure. May interest niya, wala namang sure. No. So, ito na yung totoong istorya. Ito na po yung authenticated sa World Bank. Dahil alam na alam nila yung totoo na nangyari. Okay. Pero, bago.
Clearly, the catchphrase Yamashita treasure was a coinage like Colgate, which, like many Filipinos, would generally call any brand of toothpaste.
Yung kahit na nung toothpaste, Colgate na. Pati Beachwalk, Spartan pa rin. Anong klaseng tao itong mga ito. Pati pesos. Hello. Kaya tuloy.
Thus, it should not be misconstrued as anything outside the fact that it was mainly the war booty supposedly transported by the Japanese at the height of Second World War II is all from the Vatican.
Yon. Sige.
In April 1, 1945, about 10 o'clock in the evening, U.S. Commander Charles Laughlin of the submarine Queenfish sighted the Japanese destroyer, the Awamaru, and immediately ordered his crew to fire on the enemy ship.
So, dyan, katin mo yan. I-explica ko mabuti.
Sandali.
Katin mo lang mabuti yan. So, Kaya ako nandun sa loob